"You're not his wife, Nora. You're his retirement plan." My stepdaughter said it loudly enough for all 40 guests at my mother's 80th birthday dinner to hear. For one full second, the room went silent. Then Tessa laughed into her champagne glass as if she had made the cleverest joke of the night. Two of her friends laughed with her. My husband Malcolm gave the tight little smile he always used when cruelty benefited him, but he did not want to admit it. I looked at Tessa across the long table. She was 24, wearing a silk dress I had paid for, a diamond bracelet I had given her for graduation, and the confident expression of someone who had never once had to wonder whether a bill would be paid. "Apologize," I said. Tessa rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. Everyone knows Dad married well." My mother's hand tightened around mine beneath the table. Malcolm leaned toward me and lowered his voice, though not enough to make the moment private. "She's not your daughter, Nora. Don't tell her how to behave." Something inside me went completely still. For 6 years, whenever Tessa needed tuition, I had been family. When her sorority demanded another fee, I had been family. When her Jeep payment was late, when her insurance increased, when she wanted a summer apartment near campus, when she needed dental work, a laptop, a study abroad deposit, or just a little help. Until Dad's next project closed, I had been family. But the moment I asked for basic respect, she was no longer my daughter. I set my napkin beside my plate. "You're right," I said. Malcolm blinked. "If she isn't my daughter, then she isn't my financial responsibility either." His face changed before Tessa's did. That was how I knew he understood exactly what I meant. The next morning, I canceled every voluntary payment connected to his daughter. By the end of the week, I would discover that the money I thought had funded her education had been keeping Malcolm's failing company alive. By the end of the month, he would tell my clients that I was losing my memory. And 3 months later, the man who had spent years using my kindness as collateral would stand beneath a ballroom spotlight and watch his entire reputation collapse in front of the people he had worked hardest to impress. But that night I knew none of that. I only knew I was 58 years old, sitting at my mother's birthday dinner and suddenly realizing that my marriage had been built on a definition of family that changed whenever Malcolm needed something from me. I met him 8 years earlier at a Chamber of Commerce breakfast. I owned Whitaker Payroll Solutions, a small consulting firm that managed payroll compliance for construction companies, restaurants, medical practices, and several family-owned manufacturers. I had built it slowly after my first marriage ended. At 43, I had left a husband who thought my work was a hobby and moved into a one-bedroom apartment with a folding desk. By 50, I had 12 long-term clients, 2 employees, and a reputation for finding mistakes before the government did. Malcolm Reed seemed impressed by that. He owned Reed Development Group, a commercial property company that renovated aging office buildings and converted old warehouses into expensive mixed-use projects. He was charming in the polished, deliberate way of a man who practiced remembering everyone's name. He asked questions about payroll taxes. He listened when I answered. He told me he admired women who understood numbers. At the time, I thought that meant he admired me. Now I know some people admire a locked door only because they are imagining what might be behind it. Malcolm had been divorced for 4 years. His daughter Tessa was 16 when we met, and lived mostly with her mother Diane. At first, I was careful. I did not try to replace anyone. I attended school plays, when invited remembered birthdays, and kept my advice to myself. Tessa was bright, funny, and skilled at making affection feel like a prize. When she wanted something, she called me Nora. When she received it, she called me Bonus Mom. Malcolm said she was still adjusting. She has been through a lot, he told me, whenever she ignored me, mocked my clothes, or left a restaurant without thanking me after I paid. So I tried harder. That was my first mistake. My second was believing that financial generosity could create emotional safety. When Malcolm and I married, we signed a prenuptial agreement. The house I had purchased before meeting him remained mine. My retirement accounts, investment portfolio, and business remained separate. His company and debts remained his. He said the agreement made him respect me more. "You built your life," he said on our wedding night. "I would never ask you to risk it for me." He did not ask all at once. That was the genius of it. The first request was Tessa's freshman housing deposit. Malcolm said a client payment had been delayed and he would reimburse me Friday. Friday became the end of the month. The end of the month became a conversation about how marriage was not a ledger. I let it go. Then came tuition shortfalls, sorority dues, medical insurance, car repairs, and an apartment deposit. Each request arrived wrapped in urgency and family language. "We can't let her lose her place. She's embarrassed to ask. You know how much she trusts you. This is what family does." Meanwhile, Malcolm's business always seemed one closing away from stability. He had a beautiful office, a new Lexus tailored suits, and photographs of luxury redevelopment projects on his website. He also had a talent for explaining why cash was temporarily unavailable. A permit had been delayed. A lender had changed terms. A buyer needed 30 more days. An investor had become cautious. None of it sounded impossible. Commercial real estate was unpredictable. I knew that. What I did not know was that unpredictability had become Malcolm's favorite hiding place. During the first 4 years of our marriage, I never added the total. I paid from my personal checking account because it was easier. I transferred money to what Malcolm described as Tessa's education account. I covered insurance directly. I paid the Jeep lender when he said her mother had missed a payment. I bought textbooks and plane tickets. Each individual amount was manageable. Together they were a second mortgage. I did not see that until after my mother's birthday dinner. When we got home, Malcolm followed me into the kitchen. "You embarrassed Tessa," he said. I took off my earrings and placed them beside the sink. "She called me your retirement plan in front of my mother. She was joking. You told me she wasn't my daughter. I said you shouldn't discipline her. You said exactly what you meant." He exhaled hard. "Nora, don't turn one awkward comment into a financial punishment. So you already know what I'm stopping." His eyes flickered. That tiny movement was the first crack in the wall. "Tessa has obligations," he said. "Her tuition installment is due in 9 days. Then, you and Diane can handle it. Diane can't. Then, you can. You know my liquidity is tied up. I know you drive an $80,000 vehicle." His mouth tightened. "That vehicle is part of my professional image. My heating system has been failing since February. We agreed to wait until fall." "No, you told me we needed to wait because Tessa's semester abroad was more important." He softened his voice. "You love her." "I did not say I stopped loving her. I said I stopped paying for her." He stared at me as though those two things were morally identical. That night, he slept in the guest room. The next morning, I made coffee, opened my laptop, and listed every recurring expense connected to Tessa. Tuition installment, sorority housing fee, health insurance contribution, Jeep payment, auto insurance, phone plan, monthly transfer for food. I canceled what I could and sent written notice that I would make no further voluntary payments. At 10:17, Tessa called. "What did you do?" "I stopped paying expenses that belong to your parents." "You can't just do that." "I just did. My tuition is due. Speak to your father. He said you agreed to cover the year." "I agreed before you informed a room full of people that I was financing my own exploitation." That was a joke. It was information. She became quiet. Then she said, "Dad says you're being unstable." It was the first time I heard that word. I would hear it many times afterward. That afternoon, Malcolm sent me a spreadsheet labeled Family Contributions. It was meant to prove that he had contributed equally to our household. Instead, it showed me how carefully he had avoided showing anything at all. Mortgage 0 because the house was mine and paid off. Property tax marked shared, though I had paid it from my account. Utilities split unevenly, with most automatic drafts coming from me. Groceries assigned to Malcolm, though nearly every receipt had been charged to our joint card and paid from my deposits. Tessa's costs were grouped under education investments as though language could make them mutual. I stared at the spreadsheet for several minutes. Then I opened my banking software. Numbers are honest when people are not. I searched every transfer containing Tessa's name, her college, the Jeep lender, the insurance company, and the account number Malcolm had described as her education account. The first total was $63,420. I thought I had made a mistake. I expanded the date range. $87,600 over 23 months. I sat very still. That figure did not include gifts, vacations, meals, or the cash I had handed her for emergencies. It included only traceable transfers and direct payments. My lower back began to ache, the familiar nerve pain that traveled down my left leg. I had postponed physical therapy for 7 months because Malcolm said Tessa's final year was unusually expensive. I had spent the winter using 2 portable heaters because replacing the furnace would have cost $12,000. Malcolm had told me we needed to be disciplined. I had been disciplined. He had been financed. I printed the statements and began matching transfers. Most were exactly what I expected. Then I reached the account ending in 4419. Every month, I had transferred between $1,200 and $2,800 to that account under descriptions Malcolm provided tuition reserve books program fee housing shortfall. But the recipient was not Tessa's university. It was Reed Development Group. I checked again. Then again. The account belonged to Malcolm's company. $32,400 of the money I believed was supporting Tessa's education had gone directly into his business operating account. My hands went cold. I called the bank and requested archived transfer details. The representative confirmed the destination. "Are you certain?" I asked. "Yes, ma'am. The beneficiary is Reed Development Group, LLC. I thanked her, ended the call, and walked into Malcolm's office. He was on a video call. I placed the printed statements beside his keyboard. He glanced down and muted himself. "What is this?" he asked. "You tell me." His face did not change quickly enough. That was the second crack. "You transferred money into my business," he said. "I transferred money into an account you told me belonged to Tessa's education fund. It was temporary." $32,000 is not temporary. I used it to protect cash flow until a closing. Without telling me, you would have said no. That is what consent means. He stood and shut the office door behind me. "Lower your voice. I am in my house. Our house. No, mine. According to the agreement you insisted you respected." His expression hardened. "This is exactly what I was worried about." "What were you worried about?" "You have been under enormous stress. Your mother's health, your clients, your back pain. Now you're pulling old transactions out of context and building some conspiracy around them. There is no context in which lying about an account owner becomes a misunderstanding. I was going to repay it. When the Harbor Point deal closes." "You told me Harbor Point closed last month." He looked away. That was the third crack. I asked for access to the company statements showing where my money had gone. He refused. I asked whether any of it had paid Tessa's tuition. He said that was not the point. I asked what the point was. He told me marriage required trust. I almost laughed. Instead, I picked up the statements and walked out. That evening, I called Victor Chen, an attorney who had reviewed my prenuptial agreement years earlier. I told him I needed a confidential meeting. He asked whether I felt physically safe. The question startled me. "Yes," I said. "Financially, I'm no longer sure." Victor saw me the next morning. I brought bank records, tax returns, our prenuptial agreement, and a notebook filled with dates. He read in silence for nearly an hour. Then he asked, "Has your husband ever requested access to your investment accounts?" He asked whether I would add him as an emergency contact. "Did you?" "No." "Has he asked you to borrow against the house?" "Twice. I refused." Victor leaned back. "Have you received any recent notices from your brokerage?" I remembered a letter I had placed in a drawer because it looked routine. That afternoon, I brought it to his office unopened. It was not routine. Someone had submitted a request to add Malcolm as an authorized party on one of my investment accounts. The request included my name, social security number, account number, and a signature that resembled mine. Resembled. It was not mine. The brokerage had rejected it because the signature did not match the verified sample on file. I read the letter twice. Then I placed it carefully on Victor's desk. My husband forged my signature. Victor did not soften the answer. That appears to be what happened. I felt something collapse inside me, not loudly but completely. For years I had explained Malcolm's behavior in the most generous possible language. Temporary pressure, poor communication, a complicated divorce, a difficult market, a worried father, a proud businessman. But signatures do not become forged through poor communication. Money does not accidentally enter the wrong business account for 23 months. A house does not become collateral because a husband is proud. Victor placed a legal pad between us. We need to separate your finances immediately, he said. New banking passwords, credit freeze, written revocation of any authority, notice to the brokerage, updated estate documents. And I recommend that you do not confront him about the forged signature until we preserve the evidence. I nodded. My body felt far away. Do you have somewhere else to stay? He asked. The house is mine. That is not what I asked. I thought of my mother, 80 years old and living 10 minutes away. I thought of telling her I had allowed a man to use me this completely. Shame is strange. The person who is deceived often carries it first. I'm staying, I said, but I want the locks changed on my office. Over the next 4 days, Victor and I created a wall between my assets and Malcolm's reach. My bank opened new accounts. My payroll company moved to a new encrypted storage system. I froze my credit. I updated beneficiaries. I removed shared devices from my business email. I copied every financial record I could legally access. Malcolm noticed the passwords first. He stood in the kitchen holding his phone. Why can't I access the joint savings account? Because it is being closed. Your half is being transferred to an account in your name. You did that without discussing it. I am discussing it now. His voice sharpened. What are you doing? Protecting myself. From me. Yes. He stared at me for a long time. Then he smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who had stopped pretending the conversation was about love. You are making a serious mistake, he said. No, I made a serious mistake 6 years ago. This is the correction. That was when the campaign began. At first it was subtle. Malcolm told our neighbor I had become forgetful after my mother's birthday. He told his sister I was overwhelmed by work. He suggested to Tessa that menopause had made me emotionally unpredictable. He began correcting me in public about things I had not said. You already asked me that, Nora. We discussed this yesterday. You must have forgotten. He moved my keys and watched me search for them. He changed the time of a dinner reservation and told friends I had written it down incorrectly. When I objected, he sighed with theatrical patience. This is what I mean. You become defensive whenever anyone tries to help. I began writing everything down. Dates, times, exact words. Not because I doubted myself yet, because I could feel him trying to teach me to. The first professional attack came from Peter Langley, one of my oldest clients. Peter owned a regional manufacturing company with nearly 200 employees. I had handled his payroll compliance for 15 years. He called me on a Tuesday afternoon. Nora, are you alone? Yes. I received a strange voicemail from Malcolm. My stomach tightened. What did he say? Peter was quiet for a moment. He said you've been making memory errors. He suggested I move our payroll work to another consultant before something serious happens. The room seemed to tilt. Do you still have the message? Yes. Please don't delete it. I won't. Then Peter said something I will never forget. I have known you for 15 years. You remember payroll regulations I have forgotten existed. I called because the message did not sound like concern. It sounded like preparation. I closed my eyes. Preparation for what? For people to believe him before they hear you. Peter forwarded the voicemail to Victor. Malcolm's voice was calm, regretful, almost tender. I'm worried about Nora. She's under so much pressure and there have been episodes of confusion. I would hate for a payroll error to affect your employees. It may be wise to transition the account quietly before she becomes embarrassed. Quietly. That word told me everything. He was not trying to help me. He was trying to remove witnesses to my competence. If he could make me look cognitively impaired, he could challenge my decisions, discredit my records, and perhaps argue that any financial separation resulted from confusion. He was building a story in which the woman who discovered the fraud became too forgetful to describe it. I listened to the voicemail 3 times. Then I stopped crying. Until that moment, part of me still wanted an explanation that would let me preserve the marriage. The voicemail ended that. I filed for legal separation the next morning. Victor arranged for Malcolm to be served at his office. He came home at 6 carrying the documents. "You are destroying us," he said. "No, I am documenting what you destroyed." "You are sick. Then why did you try to add yourself to my investment account?" He froze. I watched his face carefully. He recovered quickly. "I was planning for emergencies." "With a forged signature, you told me to handle the paperwork." "I did not." "You don't remember." There it was. Not even denial. Replacement. He wanted his version of my memory to become more powerful than my own. I took my phone from the counter and pressed record. "Say it again," I said. His eyes moved to the screen. "You're recording me." "Yes." "This is paranoid." "No. Paranoia is fear without evidence. I have bank records, a rejected authorization form, and your voicemail to my client." His face went pale. "You spoke to Peter." "He spoke to me." Malcolm looked toward the hallway as if searching for an exit from a room he had controlled for years. Then he tried anger. "You have benefited from my reputation, my contacts, my social circle. Do you think your little payroll practice would have grown without me? My business existed before you, and it stayed small. It stayed honest." He stepped closer. "You will regret humiliating me." I raised the phone between us. "Keep talking." He left that night. Not because he respected the separation, because he realized he could no longer speak freely in my house. For 2 weeks, I heard nothing directly from Tessa. Then she appeared at my office without an appointment. She looked different without the armor of expensive clothes. Her hair was pulled into a loose knot. Her eyes were swollen. "My tuition account is empty," she said. I waited. "Dad said you withdrew it." "There was no tuition account." She frowned. I turned my monitor toward her and showed her the transfer records. "These are the payments your father told me were going to your education fund. They went to Reed Development Group." Tessa stared at the screen. "No." "Yes. He told me you controlled the account." "I did not know the account belonged to his company." She looked at the dates. Then she sat down slowly. "He said you paid because you wanted me dependent on you." "I paid because he told me you would lose your place in school." Tessa pressed both hands against her face. For the first time since I had known her, she looked young. "He won't answer me," she whispered. "My landlord called. The Jeep payment bounced. Mom says I have to come home." I felt the old instinct rise immediately. Fix it. Protect her. Transfer the money. Then I remembered the birthday dinner. Not as punishment, as clarity. "You need to speak with your mother and the university's financial aid office," I said. Her head snapped up. "You're really not going to help me. I am helping you understand the truth. I am not paying for the lie again." She began to cry. "I didn't know. You knew enough to call me his retirement plan. Dad says things, and you repeated them." She flinched. I hated that I caused pain, but I had finally learned that discomfort is not always cruelty. Sometimes discomfort is the first honest consequence a person has ever met. Tessa left without apologizing. 3 days later, she emailed me. The subject line was, "You need to see this." Attached were screenshots of messages between her and Malcolm, along with forwarded emails he had accidentally copied her on. In one message he wrote, "Once Nora calms down, the house will solve the refinancing problem." In another, "Her investments should pass to me before Tessa. We need to clean up the beneficiary structure." And in an email to his accountant, "If she becomes difficult, we may need a capacity evaluation. I have already spoken to people about her memory problems." I read that sentence until the words blurred. He had not begun the dementia story after I discovered the transfers. He had planned it before, Tessa also forwarded a message in which Malcolm told her the tuition money came from a trust established by her grandfather. There was no trust. He had lied to both of us, shaping each version to keep us useful and suspicious of one another. I called Tessa. "Why are you sending me this?" I asked. Her voice shook. "Because he told me if I talked to you, he would stop helping me." Then I realized he was not helping me. "You were. That does not erase what you said." "I know." "Or what you accepted." "I know." She was quiet. Then she said, "I'm sorry, Nora. Not because I need money. I'm sorry because I treated you like money." It was the first apology she had ever given me without explaining why I had caused her behavior. I did not forgive her that day, but I believed the sentence cost her something. Victor added the emails to our evidence. Then another person called. Diane Foster, Malcolm's ex-wife. We had never been friends. Malcolm had described her for years as reckless, vindictive, and financially irresponsible. I had accepted his version because it made our marriage feel safe. Diane asked to meet in a public place. She arrived carrying a folder. "I heard you filed," she said. "Yes. He's telling people you're losing your mind." "I know." She gave a tired laugh with no humor in it. "He told people I was addicted to shopping when I found hidden loans." She opened the folder. Inside were old bank statements, credit applications, and correspondence from their divorce. Malcolm had used her credit to guarantee business debt. He had moved money from a college savings account. He had persuaded her to sign refinancing documents she did not understand, then called her unstable when she objected. The pattern was almost identical. Why didn't anyone know I asked? Because I was ashamed, Diane said. And because he was charming. People prefer the charming person's explanation. It requires less imagination. I looked at the documents. Why help me now? Because Tessa finally understands what happened. And because I spent years wishing someone had warned me. Diane's evidence changed everything. This was no longer a marriage dispute that could be dismissed as bitterness. It was a repeated financial pattern. Victor's team traced my transfers through Reed Development Group. The money had covered overdue loan payments, a settlement obligation from Malcolm's divorce lease payments on the Lexus, and interest on a private loan connected to the Harbor Point project. The Harbor Point deal was not approaching a profitable closing. It was collapsing. Malcolm had been using my money to create the appearance that his company remained solvent long enough to secure new financing. And the house he planned to use for refinancing was the one asset he did not own. Mine. While the legal process moved forward, I did something Malcolm had not expected. I became public before he could finish making me unbelievable. Not publicly emotional, publicly precise. I sent a confidential letter to every client he had contacted explaining that false statements had been made regarding my health and professional capacity. I included a letter from my physician confirming there was no diagnosis affecting my cognition, a statement from my attorney, and a summary of new security protocols at my company. I did not describe the marriage. I described the facts. Peter offered to speak with any client who felt uncertain. None left. 2 referred new business. My employees Sandra and Luis asked what they could do. "Keep the work perfect," I said. They did. For 15 years, Malcolm had believed reputation was built from the outside in the car, the office, the awards, the photographs, the right tables at the right events. I had built mine from the inside out, accurate records, paid employees, returned calls, and promises kept when no one was watching. When the conflict came, only one of those reputations had structure. The final confrontation happened at the Regional Business Leadership Awards. Malcolm was scheduled to receive the Civic Development Visionary Award for the Harbor Point redevelopment. Even after the financing began unraveling, the organizers had not removed his name. He intended to use the ceremony to reassure investors. Victor advised me not to attend. I agreed. Then Peter called. "The award committee has received documents," he said. "What documents?" "Evidence that Reed Development Group misrepresented funding sources. They are holding an emergency review before the ceremony." I looked at Victor. He nodded once. Diane had submitted her records. Tessa had submitted the emails. Peter had submitted Malcolm's voicemail. My attorney had submitted a factual chronology of the forged authorization request and diverted transfers. No one had leaked gossip. We had delivered documents. The ballroom was already full when the committee chair asked Malcolm to step into a private room. I was not there, but 3 people later described the scene to me, and a reporter captured the rest. Malcolm had arrived in a dark tuxedo, smiling for photographs, beside a large rendering of Harbor Point. He had invited lenders, city officials, and potential investors. At 7:35, the committee chair returned to the stage. She announced that the award had been withdrawn pending investigation into material misrepresentations and conduct inconsistent with the organization's ethical standards. The room went silent. Malcolm stood near the front holding a champagne glass. A reporter asked whether he had diverted funds from his wife. Another asked whether he had contacted her clients and questioned her mental capacity. A third asked about the forged investment authorization. The color left his face. For years, he had used public perception as a weapon. Now, public perception had received the paperwork. He tried to say the allegations came from a confused spouse during a difficult separation. Then Peter Langley stepped forward. "I received the voicemail," he said. "Mrs. Whitaker is not confused." That sentence ended the version of the story Malcolm had prepared. Within 48 hours, the Harbor Point lender suspended negotiations. A second investor withdrew. Reed Development Group's largest project entered default proceedings. Malcolm sold the Lexus within a month. The office followed. He moved into a 1-bedroom apartment across town and began telling anyone who would listen that I had destroyed a 30-year career out of revenge. But I had not called his lenders. I had not altered his books. I had not forged my signature. I had not told my clients I was losing my mind. All I had done was stop hiding the cost of his choices. That night, after the award ceremony ended, I sat alone in my living room with every lamp turned off. Messages kept arriving from people who wanted details, but I answered none of them. I had imagined that public vindication might feel powerful. Instead, I grieved the man I had believed existed. I grieved the holidays, the private jokes, the mornings when he brought me coffee, and every memory I could no longer separate from calculation. My mother called just before midnight. "Are you all right?" she asked. "No," I said. It was the first honest answer I had given anyone that day. "Do you want me to come over?" "I don't know what I want." "Then I'll sit with you while you don't know." She arrived in her robe beneath a winter coat and stayed beside me until sunrise. She did not tell me I had won. She did not say Malcolm deserved it. She simply held my hand while I mourned a marriage that had been false in ways my love had not been. That distinction mattered. His deception did not make my devotion foolish. It only meant I had offered something real to a person who treated reality as a resource to exploit. The civil settlement took 7 months. Malcolm agreed to repay a significant portion of the diverted funds, surrendered any claim against my house, and accepted responsibility for fees connected to the forged authorization request. The settlement did not use the word fraud. Lawyers often prefer language that allows everyone to leave the room. I did not need the word. I had the result. Tessa took a semester away from school and moved back in with Diane. She sold the Jeep, applied for financial aid, and took a part-time job in the university library when she returned. As part of a separate agreement, she acknowledged which personal expenses I had paid and agreed to reimburse a smaller amount over time. I did not demand repayment for tuition that had never reached her. I demanded repayment for the things she had knowingly allowed me to cover while mocking the source. Our relationship did not become warm overnight. Real change is less cinematic than regret. She called once a month. Sometimes the conversations lasted 10 minutes. Sometimes they lasted 40. She stopped calling me bonus mom and began calling me Nora without using the name as a weapon. One afternoon, nearly a year after my mother's birthday dinner, Tessa came to my office carrying an envelope. Inside was her first repayment check and a handwritten note. I thought being cared for meant never asking who paid. I was wrong. I am learning that gratitude is not a feeling, it is behavior. I read the note twice. Then I placed it in the locked drawer where I kept the forged form. Not because the two documents were equal, because I wanted to remember that evidence can record repair as well as harm. My business grew by almost 30% that year. Peter introduced me to two regional firms. Sandra became operations manager. Luis completed an advanced compliance certification. I replaced the furnace before winter and finally began physical therapy for my back. The first time warm air moved through every room of the house, I stood beneath a vent and cried. Not because of the furnace. Because I could finally spend money on my own safety without asking whether someone else's emergency mattered more. My mother recovered from the stress of the scandal more quickly than I did. One Sunday, she sat at my kitchen table drinking tea while I reviewed investment statements. "You know what hurt me most?" I asked. "That he stole from you. That I kept calling it generosity after it stopped being a choice." She reached across the table and covered my hand. "Kind people are often taught to measure themselves by how much they can endure," she said. "That does not make endurance love." I looked around the quiet kitchen. For years, Malcolm had described boundaries as cruelty questions, as disloyalty, and independence as rejection. I had believed him because I wanted the marriage to survive. But survival is not always proof that something is healthy. Sometimes it only proves that one person is carrying all the weight. The divorce became final 14 months after the birthday dinner. Malcolm did not attend the last hearing in person. His attorney appeared by video. There was no dramatic speech, no final apology, no moment when he suddenly understood what he had done. That disappointed me for a while. Then I realized accountability does not require the guilty person to achieve insight. It only requires the harmed person to stop cooperating with denial. The day the decree arrived, I took off my wedding ring and placed it beside the stack of documents Victor had helped me preserve. The ring looked very small. For years, I had allowed it to justify enormous things. The next morning, I met with a new client whose previous payroll company had left 3/4 of tax filings in disorder. The owner was anxious and embarrassed. "We should have noticed earlier," she said. "Most people notice when the pattern becomes impossible to explain away," I told her. As soon as I said it, I understood I was speaking to both of us. I repaired the filings. Her employees were paid correctly. The penalties were reduced. The crisis became manageable because the numbers were finally allowed to tell the truth. That is what I learned from my marriage, too. The truth was not that I had been foolish. The truth was that Malcolm had studied my best qualities and turned them into access points. He used my patience to buy time. He used my loyalty to avoid questions. He used my love for Tessa to move money. He used my fear of appearing selfish to keep me uncomfortable in my own home. And when I finally looked at the records, he tried to use my age against my credibility. But he made one mistake. He assumed that because I had been generous, I was weak. He forgot that I had built a business by finding what other people hoped no one would notice. Once I audited my own life, the marriage could not survive the numbers. People sometimes ask whether watching Malcolm lose his award, his project, his car, and his public standing felt like revenge. It did not. Revenge would have required me to center him again. What I felt was relief. Relief that my clients knew the truth. Relief that my house remained mine. Relief that my retirement accounts were protected. Relief that my mother no longer watched me postpone medical care for people who laughed at my sacrifice. Relief that Tessa had begun learning the difference between support and entitlement. And relief that I no longer needed Malcolm to admit I was sane before trusting my own memory. The most important boundary I set was not the canceled tuition payment. It was the moment I stopped arguing with the story he needed me to believe. He said I was selfish. The record said I had paid $87,600. He said I was confused. The bank confirmed the beneficiary account. He said he was protecting me. The voicemail told my client to leave quietly. He said we were family. The forged signature showed what family meant to him when I said no. Facts did not make the pain disappear. They gave the pain a shape. And once pain has a shape, you can stop calling it love. Today, when someone asks me what happened to my marriage, I do not give them every detail. I say this: I loved a man who believed access was the same as devotion. I helped a daughter who mistook support for an obligation. And when they told me I had no right to expect respect, I finally believed them enough to stop paying for the privilege of being disrespected. That decision cost me a marriage. It saved everything else.